Good morning. I am Mrs. Gunn, and I am one of the virtual fifth grade teachers. I will be guiding you through your wit and wisdom lessons, along with the Great Minds teacher that you've seen in the videos over the past 2 days. Today, to begin, you will need your wit and wisdom response journal. You are going to turn to page 3 and write the page number in the top right-hand corner, the title of this lesson, Module 1, Day 3, the date, 9/3/20, and then you're going to copy our learning goal underneath. Your journal should look like this. Our learning goal today is I can determine and paraphrase main ideas and key details from an article. I can synthesize main ideas and key details from an article. We are going to be referring to the article, A New Nation Comes to the Indian Country. If you don't have this learning goal and page set up in your journal, pause this video now and take a few minutes to set this up. Today, you will need the materials listed here on the clipboard. Handout 3B and 3C are located on page 7 of this slideshow. I am going to go ahead and pull out these handouts so that they are in my toolbar and I can access them when instructed to by the Great Minds teacher. So I'm going to double click and go to handout 3A, and that pulls that up as a tab here in the top. So I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going back to my slideshow, and I'm going to pull out handout 3B and leave that in my toolbar. And then I'm going to do the same thing for handout 3C. Now that I have all 3 of these handouts pulled up, I am going to go back to the slideshow and continue on. If your Wit and Wisdom journal is not set up, please pause this video and finish doing that now. If you're ready to move on, you are going to progress in the slideshow and first go into your Great Minds account by going into Clever and scrolling down to the bottom until you see the Great Minds in Sync app. You will need to double click this and enter into the program. This lets the program know that you're logged on and ready to learn for the day. That's all you need to do for now. Please do not start the new question assessment until the end of this lesson. You will go back into this Great Minds app to take that at the end. For now, let's go back to the slideshow. If you need more instructions about how to do that, you can click this red button to tell you, again, through an instructional video, how to access Great Minds through Clever. Remember, it is super important to follow along with the Great Minds teacher and me as your Wit and Wisdom teacher, and pause the video when instructed to. You're going to be taking notes on this page in your notebook. Remember, this notebook will be turned in at the end of each week as you take screenshots of it and upload them to your Google Classroom. Let's get started.
Hi, fifth graders. Welcome back to Wit and Wisdom in Sync. I'm Miss Foley, and this is day 3. We'll continue our work in Module 1, Cultures in Conflict. You will need a few materials for this lesson. They include Handout 3B, Handout 3C, Assessment 4, Focusing Question Task 1, and Wit and Wisdom in Sync Journal and something to write with. If you need any of these materials, please pause the video now and retrieve them. In this lesson, we'll deepen our knowledge of how westward expansion really did impact Native American cultures in the West. At the end of the lesson, you'll be ready to show your understanding by completing Focusing Question Task 1. What have you learned so far about how the U.S. westward expansion impacted or affected the lives of Native Americans in the West? If you have a learning partner, take a moment to share aloud your ideas. And if not, you can jot them down in your journal or just say them aloud. Pause the video now and take a moment to think about this question and share your ideas.
Okay, now it's time for you to write in your journal to answer this question. You are going to go below the learning goal and record the answer to this question now. What have you learned so far about how U.S. westward expansion impacted or changed the lives of Native Americans in the West? Go ahead and pause this video now and record the answer in your journal. You may have remembered that you learned about the Lewis and Clark expedition and how it changed what came to be known as the West. In reality, it was home to many different and established Native American cultures. You have learned about some of the beliefs, values, customs, and ways of life that many of these Native American cultures shared before the Lewis and Clark arrival. Today, you will apply what you have learned about this impact to answer an assessment in Focusing Question Task 1 at the end of this lesson. Now, let's head back to our Great Minds teacher to move forward.
Today we're going to revisit the article called A New Nation Comes to the Indian Country, and we're going to identify the main ideas and key details. We're going to look specifically for how U.S. westward expansion impacted Native Americans in the West. Doing all that work will prepare you to summarize the article and express that knowledge in Focusing Question Task 1. All right, now you're going to need your article. It's on handout 3B, and it's called A New Nation Comes to the Indian Country. You'll also need your boxes and bullets organizer on handout 3C. Pause the video now if you need to retrieve those. When we first read the article's introduction, we underlined a lot of key ideas. In the first paragraph, we learned that the Lewis and Clark expedition put boots on the ground in the West, which opened the new territory for expansion. And in that second paragraph, we learned that gold and the prospect of open lands attracted so many Americans to move west. We also learned that the process of westward expansion didn't happen peacefully, and it had an enormous impact on Native Americans who lived in the West for centuries. We use those key ideas to come up with a statement to capture the text's overall main idea. And here's the overall main idea statement that I came up with. After the Lewis and Clark expedition, European Americans began moving into the Indian country to settle the lands and find gold. This expansion greatly affected Native Americans' ways of life. Since we put the main idea statement in our own words, yours might be a little bit different from mine, and that's fine, but they should both include the same important ideas. Remember that this article is written in a way that helps us understand the different aspects of westward expansion and how they impacted Native American communities. Each heading explores a different aspect. So we see new settlers, miners, and ranchers, and all of those sections support the overall main idea. Let's work together to determine the main idea, which is going to be our next box, and the key details, or bullet points, for that next section, which is called New Settlers. Then you're going to follow the same process for the sections about miners and ranchers independently. And pretty soon, you'll use all of those main ideas and details to summarize what you learned about the impact of westward expansion on Native Americans in Focusing Question Task 1.
Okay, that was a lot of information. So let's summarize what the Great Minds teacher has just told us. If I refer to handout 3C, this is my boxes and bullets organizer that she is referring to. If you'll go ahead and pause the video and type your name, today's date, and the main idea that she just shared with us as the umbrella or overall main idea. And remember, this can be in your own words. Now, she is saying that we are going to do new settlers together and that you will come and do ranchers by yourself. Now, let's go back and listen to what she says next.
Let's reread the section New Settlers Together. Follow along as I read. Three events near mid-century unleashed a flood of American settlement across the Indian country. In 1846, a treaty with Great Britain fixed the northern boundary of the United States at the 49th parallel, securing the Americans' title to the Columbia River country. 2 years later, the discovery of gold in California began a rush that attracted 250,000 people to what had been a distant province of the young Republic of Mexico. At almost the same moment, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ended the Mexican-American War and transferred a massive arc of new territory to the United States. Suddenly, the United States had become a continental power. Settlers, merchants, and entrepreneurs heading west from St. Louis were now eager to set up American institutions across the Indian country. They assumed that the land was theirs and that their needs superseded those of the existing Indian communities. By the centennial of the Lewis and Clark expedition in 1904, more than 6 million new people had moved to the territory first visited by the Corps of Discovery. Wow. Let's see how we can group some related ideas to figure out what the main idea of this section is. Well, we see several details about the acquisition of land. There's lots of new territory being gained at this time period. We have fixed the northern boundary, which means the U.S. expanded north, and transferred a massive arc of new territory, and that was as a result of the end of the Mexican-American War. All this new territory resulted in the movement of people west. Here we have flood of American settlement, the discovery of gold, and that attracted 250,000 people. That's a lot of movement, isn't it? In the second paragraph, we see how people thought of their movement west. For example, they were eager to set up American institutions. They assumed the land was theirs, and their needs superseded, which means made more important, those of existing Indian communities. When we grouped those related ideas together, here are the big ideas that I took away from this section. First, the U.S. gained lots of territory. Second, thousands of settlers moved west. And finally, they took Native American lands as their own. So together, these ideas capture the main idea of that whole section called New Settlers. Our next step is to record a main idea statement for this section. It's kind of like telling the story of what's happening. So let's see. The United States was getting bigger, which means there's a lot more room for settlers to move westward. And as they moved west, they took over the Native American land as their own. How about this statement? As the U.S. added new territory, thousands of settlers pushed west and took Native American lands as their own. Does that statement capture the main idea of that section called New Settlers? What do you think?
What do you think? Does that main idea capture the main idea of this section, New Settlers? I think so. As the U.S. added its new territory, thousands of settlers pushed west and took Native American lands as their own. I can't even imagine if that were to happen to me. I think that is a great main idea statement that really summarizes the whole section, New Settlers.
All right, now you're going to need to go back to handout 3C and let's start using those boxes and bullets. So go ahead and record a main idea statement in the box called Main Idea 1, New Settlers. You can record that statement that I just came up with or your own main idea statement for that section. Now for the bullet points.
Okay, let's go ahead and record that main idea statement that we came up with for this section. So you're going to want to pull out that handout by clicking the tab at the top. You may need to pause this video in order to do that. Here is handout 3C. We need to record the main idea for the section New Settlers that we just decided together. So I'm going to click in this box and I'm going to record that main idea now. As the U.S. added new territory, thousands of settlers pushed west and took Native American lands as their own. Remember that your main idea statements really summarize exactly what is happening in this section as a whole. They should be about one sentence in length, and they should tell what you have learned about settlers, in the next section, miners, and in the next section, ranchers, and how they've impacted Native Americans. They should be written mostly in your own words. This time, we came up with this statement together. Notice we did not pull it directly from the text and just copy a sentence out of the article. Instead, we pulled out the main points and wrote a one-sentence main idea in our own words. Now, let's go back with our Great Minds teacher.
What key details did the author use to show this main idea? Well, guess what? We've already identified some key ideas in the evidence that we highlighted. In fact, those are the details that helped us determine the main idea about new settlers. See how connected this is? All right, let's choose a few key details that support the main idea and record them as bullet points. One detail that really helped me understand why so many settlers headed west was this one. The discovery of gold in California began a rush that attracted 250,000 people to what had been a distant province of the young Republic of Mexico. Wow, 250,000 people headed west is a lot of people. Another detail that shows how the settlers thought about the land in the West is this one. Their needs superseded those of the existing Indian communities. The fact that their needs superseded those of Native Americans shows how little they thought about the people who had lived in the West for generations. First bullet point. I can actually make this simple and clear in my own words. Many settlers moved west looking for gold. Here's something that you can always do to make sure your key details really do match your main idea. If a key detail doesn't match, it doesn't support the main idea. So let's check. Let me read the detail again. Many settlers moved west looking for gold. Yep, here in the main idea, I included thousands of settlers pushed west. My detail includes this and it tells why they pushed west. Let's check the other detail I identified. Oh, and I do need to put it in my own words. How about this for our second bullet? Settlers thought of the land as their own, disregarding Native Americans. What do you think? Does it build out that idea that settlers took Native American lands as their own? Yes, it provides more information about that main idea, which is the job of a good detail. We can also check now to see whether our first main idea about the new settlers supports the overall main idea from the introduction. The overall main idea was, after the Lewis and Clark expedition, European Americans began moving into Indian country to settle the lands and find gold. This expansion greatly affected Native Americans' ways of life. All right, let's check the new settlers and see if it supports that main idea. As the U.S. added new territory, thousands of settlers pushed west and took Native Americans' lands as their own. What do you think? Thumbs up if you think those are aligned. Yep, I think this main idea is clearly connected to the overall main idea.
I agree with the Great Minds teacher. I think that overall main idea incorporates our main idea that we came up with about new settlers. I think our key details support the main idea about settlers. I think that they all align together nicely and that everything supports the overall main idea of the article, A New Nation Comes to Indian Country. I like how she picked out those key details and then checked with her main idea to make sure that those key details really supported the points that she developed in the main idea.
Now it's your turn to...
Before we go any further, we are going to type in our handout 3C the main idea and key details we just came up with for the section settlers. So you are going to pull out your handout 3C again that we left up here in our tabs, and we're going to type in these key details here that we just came up with or found in our text that support our main idea about new settlers. So in the box key details, I am going to type the two that we just came up with. 1, many settlers thought of their land as their own, disregarding the Native Americans. If you need to pause the video now and type in this into handout 3C, go ahead and do that now. The second key detail was many settlers moved west looking for gold. We decided that this key detail that we found in the text also supported the main idea that as the U.S. added new territory, thousands of settlers pushed west and took Native Americans' land as their own. This key detail that they moved west looking for gold is a detail that supports this main idea. If you need to pause the video so that you can record this key detail in handout 3C, do so now. While we are here, let's go ahead and get the overall main idea typed in as well. We forgot to do that earlier. The overall main idea that we determined for this whole text, A New Nation Comes to the Indian Country, was after the Lewis and Clark expedition, European Americans began moving into Indian country to settle the lands and find gold. This expansion greatly affected Native Americans' ways of life. If you don't have these 3 boxes and bullets filled out in handout 3C, please pause this video now and catch up. If you're ready, let's go back and listen to our Great Minds teacher.
To capture main ideas and key details about the impact that miners and ranchers had on the Native Americans in Indian country. First, I want you to reread those sections called miners and ranchers, and as you read, review the key phrases that you underline that really helped you to understand those groups' impact on Native Americans. Pause the video now and complete those first 2 steps.
Okay, she has given us instructions to go back and reread the sections miners and ranchers in handout 3B. Then we're going to review the key phrases that help us understand that how miners and ranchers impacted Native Americans in Indian country. So let's go find handout 3B. It should have been the second tab that you opened up out of the slideshow. So on your own, you are going to come and reread miners and ranchers. We've already read together A New Nation Comes to the Indian Country, the introduction, and we just found the main idea and key details of the section titled New Settlers. Now it's time for you to practice. So you will read miners and ranchers on your own. And you're going to be thinking about what are the main idea, the overall main points in these sections. And then you will find the key details that support that overall main idea. You need to pause this video and do that now.
If you need more time to reread the sections miners and ranchers and review your underlined evidence, pause the video now and do that. As your check for understanding, you'll follow the same steps that we did together for the New Settlers section. Your job is to record main idea statements and key details for the sections miners and ranchers on handout 3C. Use key words from the text and your own words and craft a main idea statement for each section. Record 2 details that support the main idea. Pause the video now to complete this task.
Okay, so now we're going to go back to handout 3C, and on your own for your check for understanding, you are going to complete main idea 2 over the section miners, and then the 2 bullet points that support the main idea that you developed in your own words. You'll do the same thing for the section ranchers. Now for a quick review of what to do when you complete this page. You need to save this document and upload it to your Google Classroom assignment so that your teacher knows that you are finished and she can check your understanding and grade your assignment. So remember, once you're completely done with this, you're going to come to this down arrow, download this document. We talked about a special way that we're naming the documents. So we're going to erase what's in blue and we're going to name it our name plus what handout it is. So for example, if my name was Sarah, I would name this Sarah, and this is handout 3C. If you don't remember what handout you're on, you can always look at the top to determine what handout it's on. If you get used to naming the handouts this way or naming the files that you save this way, it will be much easier to keep them organized and find them. Once you type in the file name, you're going to click Save. Now, that doesn't mean you're done. All that means is that you've saved this completed PDF file to your computer, but your teacher can't see it yet. So now we need to go through the steps of turning it in. You're going to go to your Google Classroom. Give me just a minute to pull mine up in a student view. Okay, so you're going to go back to your Google Classroom and you're going to find the assignment that is given with this slideshow attached. So if I was trying to find this assignment, it's not posted yet, but by the time you're seeing this video, your assignment will be posted on Google Classroom. I'm going to go down and find where it says Wit and Wisdom, and I'm going to click on this assignment, and I'm going to come here, and on your work, I'm going to add this page that I just saved. Let me move my little picture over. So I'm going to add a file, because remember, we saved that handout as a file to our computer. I'm going to add a file. Now I've got to upload it and browse my computer to find it. So as soon as this loads, it's taking just a minute. See down here, it says waiting for Google Drive. Google Drive must be being slow. There it comes. Okay, remember, I've got to upload and browse the computer to find this file that I want to upload to Google Classroom. Oh, there it is, Sarah Handout 3C. So I'm going to click that and I want to open it. When I do that, it's going to load that completed handout 3C that I saved in my computer. What that's doing is loading it to your Google Classroom. Then your teacher has that work turned in for that assignment. Now, don't forget this last step, because it's very important that you select Turn In so that your teacher knows you're finished with your work and can grade and give feedback on this handout. Now, let's go back to our Wit and Wisdom teacher so that we can finish this lesson by taking Focus Questioning Task 1.
Welcome back. So I'm wondering, how do I write a strong summary of an informational text? As we've been learning about the people of Indian country and the impact of westward expansion, you've also been working hard to determine what the main ideas and details are in the articles we've read. This is the first and most important step in writing an informational text summary. So now you're ready to share what you've learned in a written summary in Focusing Question Task 1. But first, let's review Focusing Question Task 1 together to make sure you understand the task and exactly what to do. You'll need a copy of Assessment 4, Focusing Question Task 1. So pause the video now if you need to retrieve it.
Okay, let's pause this video. You are going to find the copy of this Assessment 4 Focus Question Task 1 in your Great Minds account. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to, after the video, go back to your Great Minds app in Clever. So you will go to Clever, you will click on Great Minds in Sync. When you do that, and you may have seen this earlier, it's going to bring up that you have an assessment or an assignment due. Now is the time that you will want to click that. it will bring out the text for the assessment that she's talking about in the video. If you don't understand those steps and what I just said, you can go back to the slideshow and you can scroll to that very last slide where it says Final Task. Click the arrow here to log into Clever, and you're going to complete Focusing Question Task 1. Then it says, use the handout 4A on this slide to evaluate your work before submitting. Now, we'll talk about that in just a minute after we hear more from our Great Minds teacher.
Along with me on Assessment 4 as we unpack Focusing Question Task 1 together. First of all, what's the purpose of the task? Why are we doing it? So the purpose of this task is to give you an opportunity to express your understanding so far of the focusing question, how did U.S. westward expansion impact Native American cultures in the West? Writing about this topic and practicing your summary writing skills in a short piece will help you prepare for the end of module task. Introduction. For the past several lessons, we've been reading short informational texts and learning about how U.S. westward expansion impacted Native American cultures in the West. In this task, you'll apply this question to your reading of the article, A New Nation Comes to the Indian Country. Here's the task. This is the part that tells you what you will actually do. Share what you have learned about the impact of U.S. westward expansion on Native American cultures in the West with fellow fifth grade students who have not read about and studied this key piece of U.S. history as you have. Write a paragraph summary of the informational text, A New Nation Comes to the Indian Country, that includes the main idea and key details from the article. Use your boxes and bullets organizer on handout 3C, as well as the model for an informational text summary on handout 3A to help you write your summary. Refer back to the text on handout 3B as needed. So think for a minute about the task and what you need to do. Then I'd like you to pause the video and restate the task in your own words, either to a learning partner or just aloud to yourself is fine. Believe it or not, this really helps you to know whether or not you understand it. Great. You're going to write a summary of the...
Now it's time to pause and let's review that focus questioning task that she's referring to. So if you will go into Clever and open up your Great Minds account and go ahead and open up that assessment if you haven't done so already. I want you to reread that again a second time and really try to understand what we are being asked to do. If you need to pause this video, go ahead and do that now so that you can reread and understand what you're doing on this focus question task.
The article, A New Nation Comes to the Indian Country, which includes the main idea and key details. Use the resources you've been working on to help you. You know what? You've already done most of the work. Your summary should include the following things: a topic statement that states the overall main idea of the text, body sentences that express 3 main ideas from the text, one from each subheading, in your own words and supported by key details, a concluding statement that reinforces the overall main idea of the text, and try to use correct spelling, punctuation, and capitalization as you write, and the correct use of the word impact or impacted at least one time should appear in your summary.
Okay, let's really take a look at what she just asked for us to do. You need to really look at this page right here, because these are going to be the things that your teacher and I will look for on your completed assessment. I need to see these things in your writing on this assessment. You must have a topic statement that states that overall main idea, just like we did on the handout 3C together. Then you need a body sentence or sentences that express 3 main ideas from the text, one of them from each subheading. It needs to be in your own words and it needs to be supported with key details. Just like you did on handout 3C, where you stated the overall main idea of each section and then listed key details that supported that main idea. Then at the end, you need a concluding statement that reinforces the overall main idea of the text. Now, what that means is that you want to restate the overall main idea of the text in different words this time than you did in your topic statement. It needs to reinforce the same overall main idea that you did in your topic statement, but just in a different way. And then, of course, as always in our writing, we want to use correct spelling, proper punctuation, and capitalize the appropriate words. The other part of this focus question task that we want to see is that you've used the vocabulary word impact or impacted at least one time somewhere in your assessment, in your summary. You can use that word in your topic statement, your concluding statement, or any of the body sentences or key details throughout. Now, this can serve as sort of like your checklist for making sure that you've got all of these things in your writing before you click to be done. Now, let's go back to the Great Minds teacher so she can tell us what to do next.
We've learned a lot about the impact of westward expansion on Native Americans in the West. Are you ready to show what you've learned in your summary of the article? Follow your classroom teacher's directions to complete Focusing Question Task 1. I can hardly wait to see how you summarize the article. Thank you for learning with me today. The knowledge that you built about this time period of U.S. westward expansion and its impact on Native American cultures in the West is really important background knowledge. Because next, we'll turn our attention to one Native American tribe, the Nez Perce, and its conflict with the United States government. Before you explore those events, you'll learn more about the Nez Perce, including the land that they called home, the traditional culture and ways of life that had sustained their people for centuries. I look forward to learning with you next time.
All right. Now that we are done with our Great Minds teacher, let's finish off our time together so you can finish your lesson for the day. You can also refer to handout 3A that we included up here in our tabs that we found here on slide 7. Handout 3A is a summary model of how your focus questioning task should look. You have your topic statement, main idea 1, main idea 2, main idea 3, and the concluding statement. This is another model that you can follow as you're answering focus question task 1, your final task of today's lesson. Also, make sure that you include that vocabulary term impact somewhere in your informational text summary. Now, let's look at what you need to complete. Once you go into Clever, I'm going to log out as me and log in as a student so you can see what this screen will look like. So you're going to log in with Google, and again, you can get the link to this on slide number 9, logging here with Clever. Once I sign in with Google and choose my account, you're going to scroll back down to your Great Minds in Sync app and double click there. Now, look what it says. Good morning. You have an assignment for the day. Okay, so your you're going to click here and start that assignment. Now, this is a sample child, so she hasn't had any assignments, but you will see your assignment clicked in here. You're going to go through and complete your focus question task that the Great Minds teacher just talked about. When you are done, you will just turn it in on the Great Minds site, and you don't need to do anything else on Google Classroom. Make sure that on Google Classroom, you have submitted handout 3C from earlier by turning it in, and then complete the focus question task on your Great Minds website. After that, you are finished. It was so fun getting to do this lesson with you today, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow in our lesson then.